Good evening, Fiji, and welcome to this evening's For the Record. 72 days are left until September 17th, when Fijians decide who they want in government. The past few days, the campaigns of registered political parties and announcement of candidates have dominated media reports. Yesterday, on Saturday, the 5th of July, the Fiji Sun published an opinion by the leader of the National Federation Party, Dr. Biman Prasad. Amongst other issues raised in the article, Dr. Prasad challenged the Attorney General, Mr. Ayaz Said Qayyum, to a public debate. For the Record had hoped to provide that forum this evening, but unfortunately, the leader of the NFP is unable to attend because he is campaigning in Lautoka. But here with us this evening is the Attorney General, Mr. Ayaz Said Qayyum. Good evening, sir, and welcome to the show.
Naka, thank you very much for having us.
Now, Mr. Attorney General, sir, the NFP believes in reducing VAT by 10%. They've even gone to the length of accusing the government of only being concerned about raking in revenue, as much revenue as possible. And they even go on to say that government is anti-poor. Now, how would you like to respond to this?
Well, firstly, Patheli, I'd like to just make a very brief comment about your invitation to Biman Prasad to be here. As you know, him and a couple of other people have said, they want to have a debate or a challenge, etc. But I think it's all a bit of a gimmick because, in fact, your invitation was given to him yesterday. He could have been here on time. Today is Sunday. But anyway, I mean, it's a pity. It would have been a good opportunity. Perhaps it is the fact that we have facts and figures on our side, and they don't necessarily have that. But anyway, look, the point is that VAT, they're making out VAT to be a very simple issue. Mm-hmm. Let me first of all start by saying that VAT is actually zero rated on a number of items, basic food items in Fiji. And the Bainimarama government has continued with that. Those basic food items are rice, tea, edible oil, powdered milk, flour and sharps, tinned fish. None of this attract any VAT. Vegetables sold in the market, root crops, fish that you buy in the supermarket or down, in the market or down the road, none of them have VAT on it. So these are the basic food items that most Fijians eat in any case and consume. And even if you look at items like flour and sharps, powdered milk, edible oil, tea, rice, they're not from Fiji. They're actually imported. But that's another issue. Let me get to that. So when they're saying that they will reduce VAT from 15% to 10%, they're essentially, that policy will not have an impact on these items I've just stated because the prices don't have VAT on it in any case. So they won't be impacted. The price of these items won't come down.
So where do you think they'll come down?
Well, I assume I was told by some people in Vanuatu that he has said to them, or NFP has said to them, by reducing VAT, you'll be able to eat more chickens. The reality is this. Let's take a chicken, for example. Okay. If you have a chicken, say if it costs $8, a frozen chicken, and if you add 15% to that, that's $9.20. Mm-hmm. If you reduce VAT from 15 to 10, the price will become $8.80. So it's 40 cents being saved on one chicken. Now, obviously, you suddenly cannot buy a whole heap of chicken because it's 40 cents less. But as any farmer would tell you, the price of chicken is not determined by VAT. The price of chicken is determined by how much you can buy the small chicks for. It depends on how much the feed costs. It depends on how much you have to invest in terms of putting your wire or the chicken wire around it. Mm-hmm. It depends on the cost of transportation from the market to your farm. All those things determine the price of a chicken. Now, so it's a very simplistic solution. It is definitely not anti-poor in the sense because the Bainimarama government has put a number of measures in place, in particular over the past 3 years, that essentially helps mitigate or helps or assists the poor people. We now have subsidized bus fares. We now have free textbooks. We now have free education. All of these things have an impact, a direct impact in terms of how much money you have left in the pocket. We have also increased the tax threshold from $8,600 to $16,000. What does that mean? It means the person before, if they earned more than $8,600, had to pay tax at a rate of 15%. Now, if you earn up to $16,000, you don't pay any tax. So So the entire amount of money goes into your pocket. So you have a lot more options in terms of you have a lot more money available in your pocket. That is what the public want. That is essentially what has in fact led the consumption-led growth for a number of years, and now you're seeing a investment-led growth. In other words, when people had more money in their pockets, people were spending it. When they spend, so if I, for example, I have $500 more in my pocket, I may go and eat Chicken Express every day, right? Or I may go and put money aside to buy a second-hand car, or I may paint my roof, or I may paint my house. All of these options that people now have had, and that's what in fact has led the consumption-led growth, and now there's investment-led growth. And investment-led growth, of course, is another issue that we can talk about. Now, getting back to the point about imported food items, like fuel, like wheat, like powdered milk, like tea, like cooking oil, all of that comes from overseas. Government does not determine the price. Government does, however, have price control over it. So if, for example, hypothetically, the world price of wheat is, say, for example, $100 a ton, when it lands in Fiji, we don't have any control. We only have control over the price of wheat once it lands in Fiji. Then government, through Commerce Commission, works with them. They determine what kind of margin or what percentage of margin that a distributor or manufacturer can have. So Flour Mills of Fiji has a particular percentage only which they can sell it on. But when it lands, we don't have a control over it. In the same way with fuel. When there is a winter in Europe, all the Europeans get cold, so they use more fuel, they use gas. So the world price of gas goes up. It has an impact on Fiji. We have absolutely no control over it.
Well, that clearly explains that, well, you're definitely, the accusations from the National Federation Party on basic food items, well, you've completely covered that.
Well, Pedeli, also one thing, when you have a VAT reduction across the board, where does most of the VAT income come from? It comes from tourism.
Sure.
It comes from the manufacturing sector. It comes from the investors. So it will in fact affect those people the most. They will benefit at the overall expense of the Fijian economy, because the government will collect anywhere between $260 million to $280 million less. So how will he plug that hole? How is he going to get the $250 million, $280 million? Is he going to increase your taxes? Is he going to cut back on education and funding? Is he going to cut back on road making? That's what people need to ask, and not fall for the gimmicks.
On that note, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back here on this For the Record. Welcome back to the show. We're with the Attorney General, Mr. Ayaz Said Qayyum. Now, Mr. Qayyum, you also are the General Secretary for the FijiFirst, and recently, well, the FijiFirst party has come out with the declaration of all the assets of specifically the office bearers and candidates for FijiFirst political party. Very thorough, and we cannot, if we looked at those documents submitted by other political parties, as not as thorough as FijiFirst. Now, are there, as the role of minister responsible for elections, were there guidelines set for the time part, or at least the conditions of the declaration?
Well, Pedeli, the declaration and what should be contained in the declaration is actually set by law. So it's the law that has the determination, makes the determination, and that is administered by the Registrar of Political Party, which is the Supervisor of Elections. It's got nothing to do with me as Minister responsible for elections, per se. So the issue there is, and I think you quite rightly pointed out, that it's actually the spirit of transparency is what the law is all about. It's the spirit of being able to tell the public, this is exactly what we have, these are the liabilities we have. Now, there are two interesting points that comes from this. One of them, if you look at the declaration made by our leader, the Honorable Prime Minister, in his personal capacity, the Minister for Women, who is also our President, the Tui Madhwata, who is also our Vice President, our Treasurer, Vimlesh Kumar, and also myself as General Secretary. The declarations are extremely thorough. You actually have the actual amounts, you have the bank account details, you have the land title details, you have the amounts at which they were purchased at, etc. All of those declarations have been made. And I think, frankly, if you look at the declarations made by the other political parties, these are all public documents also, which were published in the Fiji Sun, you will see that, for example, the leader of SODELPA has all very well-rounded figures. It does not show a source of income. It does not show a bank account detail. It does not show the title number or the title or the lease number of the actual property that's supposedly owned. You will see the leader of the Fiji Labour Party declaring an asset, I think, value of about $3 million. Does not say how that is made up. So these are the kind of details that have not been included in the others. Of course, the officials of NFP and PDP, the current officials, most of them weren't there when the declaration was made by the party. Subsequently, the leadership has changed. So the new leaders did not make any declaration. We would have expected them to, in the spirit of transparency, notwithstanding the fact that there was no specific requirement for them to do that, because at the point of registration they weren't the leaders, they should have still made it. But in any case, we have now amended the law. That's why we had to amend the law to say that they are also now captured. That's why the amendment was made. Of course, the PDP overlooked some of the provisions of the decree and made some very public and personalized comments, which is, I think I need to take a point with that, because the issue is that if you see our leader, Prime Minister Benny Marama, and you'll see the officials of FijiFirst, we do not engage in personalized comments. We certainly do not jump to conclusions. We actually read the laws. We actually read what are the requirements, for example, made for declarations, and we have been extremely transparent in those processes. Similarly, you will see that we are focusing on facts. You will see that a lot of the allegations that are being made are essentially conjecture. UFDUF, the organization, the United Front for Democratic Fiji, which apparently is made up of all these political parties. Some are now saying they're no longer part of it. Some are saying they're still part of it. There were statements issued last year saying that, the Prime Minister was earning $700,000. Some of these, their known supporters reporting on social media, saying
millions of dollars.
Yeah, the Prime Minister is earning $1.7 million, is a $7 million home. All of that is all conjecture. Absolutely no proof. So this is what differentiates FijiFirst from the other political parties, in that we are focused on the facts. We are focused on the future. We are not focused on personalities. So in terms of the declarations that have been made, you'll see it's completely transparent.
Now, and do you feel that PDP has said that, with the amendments that have been made, do you feel that enough notification in terms of publicizing and informing the officers, or publicizing it in a forum that would have availed, they feel that they were not made available the particular amendment?
Look, any political party, not just now, but previously, everybody reads the Gazette. They have lawyers in their team. They need to look at the Gazette. And it gives them 30 days from 30th of June to declare their assets and liabilities. It's very simple. Like everybody else had 30 days to declare their assets and liabilities, they also have 30 days to declare their assets and liabilities.
The leader for the Fiji Labour Party has even said that maybe assets should be declared. In fact, he was referring to the Prime Minister, saying that they should disclose their actual salaries from way back as 7 years or 6 years since they've been in office. Well, do you think this is...
Well, again, you see, I think, unfortunately for some of these politicians, they're clutching at straws. One can also, speculate if there was no requirement to make these declarations, would the leader of Labour Party had ever made those declarations? In fact, if it was for some of these criminal matters before the courts, would all these facts would have come out into the public space? So we can go on about this, but the fact is the law is there. The law says you need to make a declaration of your income. You need to show your assets. You need to show your liabilities, that of yourself, your spouse, and essentially any dependent children. And that's exactly what has happened. And we want everybody to have the same level of transparency that has been exemplified by our leader of FijiFirst.
Thank you very much. On that note, we'll cut to a short break. We'll be right back on For the Record. Welcome back to For the Record, and we're speaking with the Attorney General and also the General Secretary of the FijiFirst political party. Now, let's talk about FijiFirst. How do you feel so far? You've been around the country, and how do you feel, or what type of response have you been receiving?
Well, I mean, there's one thing that's quite apparent, is that, as you know, the leader of our party, Prime Minister Benny Marama, is officially starting his campaign tomorrow, starting in Coronavia, then he's in Rewa, and then the following days in W level. One thing is quite apparent is that the rest of the political parties have spread a lot of misinformation. The rest of the political parties, in fact, are lying to the public of Fiji, because if you listen to some of the things they're saying, we've had people, obviously, who are supporters of FijiFirst who've gone to their meetings. Mm-hmm. In some meetings, they're saying that there's a government debt of $480 billion. I mean, our GDP is about $7 billion. They're going around and saying that the Itauke land is no longer safe. They're going around and saying that Fiji will be sold to the Chinese. They're going around and saying that government is anti-poor, that inflation is shot through the roof, and it's because of the Benny Marama government is that the price of goods have all gone up. Obviously, all of these issues that they're raising can be verified through the Reserve Bank of Fiji, FIRCA, the Constitution, the various laws. You can look at that. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So FijiFirst's focus is to tell people the truth. The record of the Benny Marama government speaks for itself. And the Benny Marama government is focused on ensuring that those policies continue and in fact get improved upon once they are elected into parliament.
Now, how do you feel that with FijiFirst, Mahendra Chaudhry, the leader of the Fiji Labour Party, has said that the assets that FijiFirst has seemed to have accumulated since registering is massive. How do you feel about those comments?
It's absolutely not massive at all. In fact, the only two assets we have are two vehicles that have been purchased, which is in our declaration. Yes, we do have offices around Fiji now, but they're all rented, all short term, and I can tell you they're all rented up till September only. All of the offices around Fiji. We don't own any of the buildings. And yes, people have donated funds, and they've all been receipted, and they can all be held accountable. And as provided for under the law, the Registrar of Political Parties, we will need to submit our accounts, as will all other political parties, in due course. We need to supply it to them. So, you see, again, you see that there is distractions. If you see what he's saying, you see the misinformation being spread by Sodelpa, you see what the leader of NFP is saying, you see what the leader of PDP is saying. They're not real issues. They're all distractions. Because we suspect they don't really have much to offer. There is not much really that they can fault of what our leader has done as Prime Minister over the past 7 years. So they're trying to have what we call all these sideshows. They're also trying to spread misinformation and lies about what is in the Constitution, what isn't in the Constitution. And this is what we're trying to urge all Fijians. Look at the facts. Look at the track record. Look at the facts that we'll be providing you, backed by independent institutions. And please look at the future. What do you want in the future? If the Benny Marama government has been able to do so much for the poor people, for people living in the maritime areas, people living in the rural areas in terms of infrastructure, in terms of social assistance, a new pension has been introduced, in terms of food voucher program for pregnant women, for those over the age of 70. If all of this has been done in a period when many of these political parties themselves were actively engaged with some of our neighbors like Australia, New Zealand, USA, many of the international organizations actively working against Fiji and the Fijian people because of the Bainimarama government. Despite that, the Bainimarama government has been able to do so much. Can you imagine what the Bainimarama government can do now without those restrictions? Imagine that. And you will see a new era of prosperity with an elected FijiFirst government.
Well, there's a huge number of first-time voters in this year's elections. How does FijiFirst look to engage these first-time voters?
Well, you know, there's obviously various means in terms of engaging them. As you know, that many young people don't necessarily come to pocket meetings. They spend a lot of the time on phones, on watching television.
Social media.
Social media, Facebook. We understand there's something like 400,000 Facebook users in Fiji. A lot of them are concentrated between the Nassori-Lamy corridor. Of course, there's some in the west too. So there's various ways of reaching out to them. We have a very up-to-date website where people can go to and get information from. So we need to appeal to them through those bases. We also obviously see, again, there's misinformation out there. There's a lot of misinformation, for example, on Facebook. So we need to get into those areas and to be able to engage with them. Mind you, our Facebook usage and users and people who like it may not necessarily be as much as some of the other political parties because they had a head start on us, but our percentage of engagement is far higher. So it's one thing to like, but it's the level of engagement you have, level of interaction you have on Facebook, ours is a lot higher. So people are obviously a lot more enthusiastic in terms of interacting with FijiFirst.
Well, just before we wrap up the show, would you care to state any other comments regarding FijiFirst and what first-time or voters are to look forward to in come the elections? When is the next list of candidates going to be announced from FijiFirst?
Well, that obviously will be determined by the party. It's not my place to comment in terms of when that list will come out. But obviously FijiFirst has a very open and transparent basis. As you know, we've advertised quite extensively through all forms of media to get people to apply. As you know, that many people are also a bit reluctant because they have always, given our history, they've seen politicians and politics as a bit of a dirty game, that you need to be a particular type of person to be a member of parliament. We're trying to tell, in particular young people and a lot of the women, that you don't have to be of the same ilk as the people who were there in the past. You can be different. You can be your own self. You essentially have to believe in the core values of FijiFirst, and many of them do, but they're still a bit hesitant to get into parliament. They think everybody will be watching them, etc. But there are many people out there who have shown a lot of enthusiasm to joining FijiFirst. As you know that when we advertised through text messaging, we had over 2,000 people within a span of a few days who text messaged and said they want to be volunteers. And we were very pleasantly surprised that a lot of them were below the age of 30 who wanted to volunteer. In fact, at some of our offices, a lot of the people who are volunteering are people below the age of 30 who are university students who come in as part-time, on a part-time basis. So we are very encouraged by that, and we will continue to reach out to them. All we ask the Fijian people to do is to please listen to the facts. Don't fall for the gimmicks. You need to ask the questions when politicians will come and make very simplified statements.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Naka, thank you for having us.
The Attorney General, Mr. Ayasaid Koyum, and that wraps up this evening's show. You can join us again next week, the same time, same place. For questions and comments about the show, please send them to fortherecord@fbc.com.fj. We'll talk to you again next week. Good night, Fiji.